Between the time when the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of. And unto this, Conan, destined to bear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia upon a troubled brow.
Purging is at last at hand. The day of doom is here.
They said you would come from the north. A man of great strength. A man who would someday be king by his own hand. One who would crush the snakes of the earth.
Snakes? Did you say snakes?
What is it you seek?
A standard. A symbol. Perhaps on a shield. Two snakes coming together.
I've chafed for years at this demigod. Snakes, my beautiful city. To the west, the Media Aquilonia. To the south, Carth Stygia. Snakes. Everywhere these evil towers. You alone have stood up to their guard.
You killed my mother. You killed my father. You killed my people. You took my father's sword.
What is steel compared to the hand that wields it?
Look at the strength of your body, the desire in your heart. I gave you this.
Crom, grant me one request. Grant me revenge.
And if you do not listen,
Then the hell with you.
In March 1982, Conan the Barbarian hacked its way to the box office, making over $130 million worldwide, proving to be a huge success for Arnold Schwarzenegger, being his first feature film for a major studio. Conan the Barbarian was the last movie released by a major studio with a mono soundtrack. According to Basil Poledouris, the composer, the producers balked at the cost of spending $30,000 on a stereo soundtrack. They were worried about the availability of Dolby Stereo equipped theatres. I think when Star Wars came out, most cinema owners were eager to upgrade their equipment. Reviews on release were very positive, with many praising the movie's direction and visual style. Some were concerned over the graphic violence. By today's standards, it's very tame, but the action certainly didn't hold back when it came to Conan hacking away at his enemies. The movie did originally receive an X rating, so more cuts were made to make the R rating. Arnold's acting was also criticised. He obviously looked the part, but when it came to the delivery of his lines of dialogue, it left a lot to be desired. But thankfully, Conan is a man of few words. The movie was based on the stories of Conan, originally written by Robert E. Howard, who many call the father of sword and sorcery. Robert lived in a small town in Texas and only lived to 30 years old, committing suicide in 1936 after the death of his mother. Many say Robert wasn't mentally stable throughout his life, but during his short time on this planet, he had created many fictional characters and stories that were published in newspapers and pulp magazines. His most popular character, of course, was Conan, but also Kull of Atlantis, the direct forerunner to the famous Barbarian. Producer Edward R. Pressman saw a rough cut of Pumping Iron starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Edward wanted to put Arnold into a film, being so impressed with his physique. Edward thought he would be a perfect fit for Conan the Barbarian. After he obtained the rights to make a feature film, it took over 5 years to get it finally into production. Ed Summer and Roy Thomas wrote the first script. Roy had worked on the Conan comics at Marvel during the late 70s, and he actually went on to write the sequel, Conan the Destroyer. But it wasn't until Oliver Stone had a stab at it that the project really got moving. Edward Pressman was really impressed with Oliver and his knowledge of history and his overall vision of Conan. Oliver was originally going to co-direct with Joe Alves. Joe was second unit director on Jaws and would later direct Jaws 3D. Ridley Scott had been in talks to direct but turned it down, and they went with Academy Award winning writer John Milius, who was suggested by Dino De Laurentiis. John was already an accomplished director, and having always wanted to make a movie like this. He loved Oliver Stone's script, but had no idea who Conan was. His aim was to try and make a believable world, bring it into reality and put it in a history like it could have happened. Conceptual artist Ron Cobb, who worked on Alien, helped visualise the world of Conan. He originally came on board when the script was in its early stages and was producing set pieces that were more fantasy based, but once Oliver Stone's script was used, things were scaled back so the buildings looked more reminiscent of past architecture. Ron Cobb makes a cameo in the film and also directed the opening sequence of the sword being made by Conan's father. Arnold Schwarzenegger was already known throughout the world for his bodybuilding accomplishments. Arnold needed a lot of voice coaching to improve his English, and James Earl Jones gave him pointers on how to deliver his dialogue to maximise his performance. Arnold also had to slim down a little to help him wield his sword. Having such big arms and pecs, it made it difficult for him to spin the weapon around. James Earl Jones plays Thulsa Doom. His character isn't actually from the Conan comics. He appeared in the Kull series. They wanted his character to be the last of a dying race. Thulsa is joined by two henchmen, Arnold's friend Sven Ole Thorsen and an ex-NFL defense player, Ben Davidson. Max von Sydow was more than happy to take on the role of the King Osric. Despite John's doubts, luckily Max's son was a huge fan of the comics and he thought it would be fun to play the part, and of course his son would be pleased. Sandal Bergman was a professional dancer and stuntwoman and came to the attention of the director in her performance of All That Jazz. She plays Valeria, who is a thief like Conan and very much likes to operate on her own. Because no stuntwoman could be found to match her size, she had to learn to do all her own stunts, nearly losing a finger in the process during a sword fight. Jerry Lopez was a close friend of John Milius and a fellow surfing buddy. Jerry had no acting experience, but John felt confident he could do it, and he screen tested and got the part of Subutai. Mako plays the eccentric wizard Akiro, who has the powers to bring people back from the dead. The movie opens in the fictional Hyborian Age, thousands of years before the rise of modern civilization, when the oceans destroyed Atlantis. After watching his father forge a sword, Conan is told of the riddle of steel and its importance of the metal to their people, the Sumerians. Soon after, the Sumerians are massacred by a band of warriors led by the evil wizard Thulsa Doom, with Conan's father killed by the band's dogs. Watching his father's newly forged sword being used by Doom to decapitate Conan's mother, Conan is taken into slavery, where he is chained to a large mill, the Wheel of Pain, for years. Having grown into a strong man, which I always found to be a bit odd, he must have been fed well to gain that muscle mass. Conan is then sold to a new master and trained to be a gladiator, which is actually a new idea thrown into the film. I believe this never occurred in the original stories. Eventually, after winning many pit fights, Conan is set free. While freeing from wild dogs, Conan stumbles upon an ancient tomb and takes refuge inside it. Inside, he finds a ceremoniously displayed skeleton with a sword, which he takes as his own. As he wanders around the world, Conan encounters a young witch, with whom he has sex with in exchange for information about Doom. However, she turns into a demon, and in a smart move he chucks her on the fire. As Conan leaves, he encounters and befriends the witch's captive, Subutai, a thief and archer, who becomes Conan's companion. Following the witch's advice, Conan and Subutai seek out Doom. They meet Valeria, a thief very much like Conan. The three break into the Tower of Serpents, a temple of Doom's snake cult, and steal a large jewel, the Eye of the Serpent, and other valuables. The group escape with their loot but are captured during their celebrations. The city guards bring him to King Osric. He requests they rescue his daughter, who has joined Doom's cult. Subutai and Valeria do not want to take part. Conan, however, is motivated by his hatred for Doom. He sets off alone to the villain's temple. Disguised as a priest, Conan infiltrates the temple, but he is discovered, captured and tortured. Doom lectures him on the power of flesh, which he demonstrates by compelling a girl to leap to her death. He then orders Conan to be crucified on the Tree of Woe. The barbarian is on the verge of death when he is discovered by Subutai and brought to Akiro, the Wizard of the Mounds and Conan's future chronicler. The wizard summons spirits to heal Conan and warns that they will extract a heavy toll, which Valeria is willing to pay. Conan regains his strength back and plans revenge. The movie does include some nifty optical effects but keeps things simple, and there aren't many throughout the film. The opening speech with Conan's father is traditional blue screen. For 1982, it's dated pretty well. The image doesn't exhibit that much colour loss. I've seen far worse blue screen in the 80s. The director wanted to keep the supernatural elements low-key. You have animated rotoscoped sequences of the witch as she turns into a ball of light and speeds out of her hut when she escapes from Conan. The most notable effect is the ghosts that come to take Conan away. They animated the demon-like characters and printed the images onto film with an animation stand and contact printer and added some lens flare to spice up the image. The sequence was handled by Industrial Light and Magic. But what many people will remember from the film is the giant mechanical snake and the transformation of James Earl Jones. For the effect of Thulsa turning into a snake, they made a mask of James Earl Jones and literally pushed the head of a snake into it from the back to create that transformation effect. Basil Poledouris provides probably the best score of his career. Basil became attached to the film very early on. The director envisioned Conan as an opera with little to no dialogue, so Basil composed roughly 2 hours of music. In late November of 1981, the score was recorded in 3 weeks with a 90-piece orchestra and 24 choir singers. What I love about the score is that it sounds like it's from that period. It helps paint an image of the ancient past and doesn't feel modern in the slightest. My favourite tracks are the Riders of Doom and the love theme for Conan and Valeria. It was of course released at the time on LP and tape and made its way to CD, but it wasn't until over 20 years later that fans got to listen to the full score. It got a 3 CD release in 2012 and is still available to purchase. In 2010 they also re-recorded Basil's work for a new CD release. It's great to see the popularity of the score has sustained over these years. There have been a number of Conan-based games released over the years. First there was Conan Hall of Volta, published by Datasoft and released across a number of platforms. The Apple II, Amiga, Atari ST, MS-DOS and Commodore 64, but it didn't debut until the second film arrived. It's just your traditional platform game that was surprisingly popular on release, down to its detailed levels and animation. Next was Conan the Cimmerian for MS-DOS, a point-and-click adventure. Graphically it was very impressive and many fans enjoyed it, but it was notoriously difficult. Many gamers complained that it was riddled with crippling bugs. On the NES there was The Mysteries of Time, which arrived in 1990. System 3 makers of the awesome Last Ninja series programmed this version. This was a basic reskin of their game Myth History in the Making. I think they just swapped over the playable characters with the Conan sprite. A lazy conversion and was heavily panned by gamers at the time. A third-person perspective action-adventure published by TDK in 2004 for the PS2, Xbox, GameCube and PC. It was called Conan the Dark Axe. It was a lengthy tale that saw Conan visit and fight in nearly all parts of the Hyborian world. The game was based on the original stories but also paid homage to the 1982 movie. For the 360 and PS3, Conan came out in 2007. Conan was a single-player game with a third-person perspective. The game offered you a good variety of weapons and combos to enable the player to pull off more extreme kills, sending limbs and heads flying everywhere. The game featured the voice of Ron Perlman as the mighty barbarian. Ron also went on to play Conan's father in the 2011 movie. I used to have this game and really enjoyed it but never completed it. The end boss was too difficult. Also, I lent it to a friend and he passed it on to someone else and I never got it back, so I'm owed a copy of Conan. More recently, in 2011, there was an MMORPG game called Age of Conan Unchained. You get the chance to create your own character to venture around the Hyborian world. The game was received very favourably and has had many updates since its release. Apparently it's now free to play on Steam. Fans were given a follow-up called Conan the Destroyer, which Arnold did return for with Mako and some members of the original crew. With a change of director, they wanted to address the issues the fans had with the first movie. More fantasy elements were included and the world was certainly more outlandish and colourful. Some people actually prefer this movie due to the changes made. To me it felt a lot more campier and it tries to push the comedy too much. I have no problem with the inclusion of more comic book elements, but I wish it was handled a little bit better. It lacks the quality direction John Milius supplied in the first movie. What is most impressive with this film is the amazing foreground miniatures used to expand the world and the elaborate sets. It's certainly not a bad sequel, but a departure for me in the overall quality the first movie set up. The following year, Richard Fleischer returned to direct the spin-off movie Red Sonja. Arnold returns, but not to play Conan, but a similar character called Lord Calidor. Apparently they didn't have the rights to use the Conan name. Bridget Nielsen plays Red Sonja and was only 21 when she got the part. Critics panned the movie and even Arnold said it was one of the worst movies he has been involved with. Sandal Bergman is back but playing a different character. She was originally offered the part Red Sonja, but she decided she wanted to play the main villain. It's odd there is a huge drop-off in quality in comparison to Conan the Destroyer, which only came out the year before. It seems like a very rushed production. The editing is a joke, and Bridget's limited acting abilities makes the film laughable to watch. Author Robert E. Howard's other popular fictional barbarian character, Carl, who lived in a time way before Conan, got his own feature in 1997, starring Kevin Sorbo, who many will remember from the TV show Hercules. I never saw this film on release, and I think it had poor distribution after it flopped in the States. I saw it recently and it looked like a TV movie, with cheap effects and lousy performances. The film was originally intended to be a third Conan film, Conan the Conqueror. The protagonist was changed due to Arnold's refusal to reprise his role as Conan, and Kevin Sorbo's reluctance to redo a character already played, hence why they went with Robert E. Howard's previous creation, Carl. In 2011 they rebooted the franchise and it was a total bomb on release. The actor playing Conan, Jason Momoa, did a great job with the character and certainly looked the part, but the movie really failed to gain an audience. Costing over $90 million to make, it made just over $40 million worldwide. I remember many complaining about the sloppy post-conversion to 3D and the obvious CGI effects. I saw snippets of it when it came out, when I worked as a projectionist, but I did manage to see it properly recently. It wasn't as bad as the reviews made it out to be, but certainly it's pretty forgettable. It relied on way too much action, and with sequences that go on for far too long, and it had little story past the introduction of Conan and how his family was slaughtered. Many of the performances were pretty hammy, and the main villain felt like a stock character from another fantasy movie. His daughter especially was a pain in the arse, and I did cheer when she got killed off. Also, they didn't use Basil Podoros' themes. All you get is this very generic action soundtrack, which you've heard a million times before. Because of its failure, they are now trying to pursue a direct sequel to the original movie with Arnold returning. I believe they've nearly finalised the script and the producers are looking for a financial backers. It would be great to see Arnold return once again to play the character that started his career. The beauty of Conan the Barbarian is that its story is told so well visually. You could have no dialogue in the film and you would still be able to follow the movie very easily. That is the beauty of John Milius' direction. The journey of Conan as he seeks revenge is so clearly translated onto the big screen. The film certainly looks epic from the get-go. The photography is a very earthy design and captures the great landscapes. There is very little use of primary colours. Everything is very much subdued. Some may say not making it a visually striking film, but I think that's what keeps it grounded in reality. They really have created a believable world, but by going with this realistic approach, it deviated from the fantasy world that was very familiar to the fans of the Marvel comics and the classic Howard stories. It's not to say the film is void of any fantasy elements. It deals with demigods, magic and giant snakes, but certainly it's more low-key than say its sequel. I was disappointed that there wasn't a big battle between Conan and Doom. You just have him trying to manipulate Conan, which doesn't work, and he just hacks his head off. I suppose on a larger, more fantasy-based adventure, it could have had him call forth these giant snakes to attack Conan, or use magic, but it keeps it simple. It's not a major problem, but it feels somewhat anticlimactic. It's funny to see how many films focused on sword and sorcery in the 80s, and it sort of shifted from the big screen to the small screen in the 90s, with shows such as Xena and Hercules. It wasn't until The Lord of the Rings came out that fantasy-based feature films really hit its stride again. I think Hawk the Slayer in 1980 really started that trend in fantasy adventure movies, followed by Excalibur, and Conan got his chance and made a big impact on audiences, and many imitations followed. It's disappointing Conan's popularity never really sustained despite the sequel doing pretty well. The quality had dropped and Arnold wanted to do other things and didn't want to continue working with Dino De Laurentiis, who intended to pursue further sequels. Oliver Stone had originally written 12 chapters and was hoping Arnold would return every other year to do a follow-up. The end scene of Conan sitting on his throne clearly indicates a sequel would follow, which it did, but because Conan the Destroyer didn't really make the impact needed, the idea of the sequels quickly diminished. John Milius wanted to do a trilogy, with each film having a different theme. The second movie would deal with responsibility, and the third was about tradition and loyalty. Conan the Barbarian is certainly not a film for everyone. Some of my friends aren't too keen on it. They find it too slow and a bit boring. You do have to have a fondness for the fantasy genre. James Earl Jones clearly steals the film despite not being on screen for long periods of time. The best villains always leave a lasting impression on the audience, and being the voice of Darth Vader, he grabs your attention as soon as he speaks. I think what the other Conan films failed to do is providing a good villain. It isn't all about being macho and making lame attempts to be threatening. James Earl Jones makes it known from the start that he is not a guy you want to mess with. In his own way, he seduces the audience, but I did always find his long hairpiece hilarious. I don't think it really suited him, but I suppose it makes him look very different and unique to everyone else. It goes with that last member of a dying race. It's interesting to see the lead character die halfway through the film. Conan gets clearly outnumbered and does come face to face with his enemy, but he is left in a weak state and he is crucified. It's very powerful imagery and very unpredictable. Oliver Stone created a great story arc for Conan. You see him learn and change as he goes through the movie. He also puts Conan through a lot of physical and emotional pain, losing his parents, being put into slavery, being crucified, and then losing the woman he loved. If you haven't had a chance to see Conan, or haven't seen it in a long time, then hopefully you will be inspired to seek it out or grab it from your collection and watch it. It's certainly one of Arnold's better movies, and for one of his first in his career as an actor, that's mighty impressive. The quality of the production is certainly better than many of Arnold's most fondly remembered movies from the 80s. The film still holds up really well today. It's got the action, the visuals, a story I feel that manages to keep you interested throughout its 2-hour running time, and of course, we can't forget its powerful and moving soundtrack.
As we speak, my daughter travels east to Thulsa Doom and his mountain of power. She is to be his. Steal my daughter back. Take all you can carry. There's more. There's much more. Enough to become kings yourself.
Infidels of fires shall all drown in lakes of blood. Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
He will kill you! He has seen your fires! He will come for me, and when he does, he will kill you!
Do you want to live forever?
Don't forget, you can still purchase the poster celebrating 100 retrospectives. You can find a link to the poster in the description box below or via my website. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find more retrospective reviews by clicking on these videos.